In 2027, a new piece of technology has been implemented to fight crime. The Memorize chip, an implant that records everything you see. A task force has been assembled to collect and monitor the data taken from the chips, known as the Special Surveillance Unit. With everyone given the implant, they're watching what you see. 5 years have passed, and New York City has changed dramatically. Criminals and vigilantes are carving up the city into independent territories. The SSU has begun fielding heavily armed operatives known as agents. Internecine wars are breaking out on the streets. Citizens are refusing to leave their homes in fear of what they might see. Businesses have shut down, the streets have fallen into disrepair. Once promising housing communities are now derelict. As Agent Gumshoe, the player must solve the mystery surrounding a series of homicides in the Trinity Towers district. Following the trail will lead the player through the domains of 3 factions fighting for control of the district. All is not as it seems, because a fourth, hitherto unknown entity is stirring up unrest in the area. Once the true enemy has been uncovered, Gumshoe must unite the factions to take down the enemy that threatens civilization and restore peace to this part of the city. This is the world of Gumshoe Chronicles 2032.
Abandoned factory buildings have been converted to apartments. Above-ground walkways and underground tunnels provide the citizens with routes of travel out of the public eye. Seedy street vendors line the roads at night in hand-built kiosks, peddling their wares to passers-by. In the distance, towering engineering and architectural wonders of a skyline created in the 19th and 20th centuries can be seen, one of the only reminders of a thriving city past. Interior structures range from crumbling Cold War-era concrete to contemporary tech-inspired marbles. Graffiti lines the walls, wires hang from ceilings, elevators seldom function, and apartments have the look of fortifications instead of homes. Items of necessity are carefully hoarded and hidden from the casual observer. Rooftop gardens provide the tenants with food that is otherwise in short supply.
Steam rises from sewer vents and the streets are littered with trash and debris. Neighborhoods are blockaded with abandoned vehicles and armed gangs patrol the streets on the lookout for threats. The night is cold and wet as rain blankets the streets of the Trinity Towers district. Neon advertisements refract against the shiny, saturated streets, creating dazzling reflections that light up Main Street. As the sun rises above Trinity Towers, the streets become even less populated. Those that are forced to leave their homes for necessities such as groceries often do so in groups. Many residents are happy to have the neighborhood watch as an escort. Schools are heavily guarded by police that act as more of a deterrent than an effective defense against criminals. Just beyond the police barricades are run-down homes that have been abandoned by their previous residents. Looters have taken everything of value, and junkies hold up inside. The dark underworld that was once kept hidden from the general populace has turned inside out. Shady characters stand on street corners, muttering uneasily and glancing around with suspicion. Fully rendered 3D characters and environments will be complemented by the bright yet gloomy lighting during the day and dark and eerie lighting during the night. Daytime aesthetics will closely resemble Remedy Entertainment's Quantum Break, with a not-too-distant future look, fallen industry, and cloudy yet bright sky. Ridley Scott's 1982 film, Blade Runner, is an excellent example of the mood that we're trying to achieve for the nighttime aesthetic, just not as futuristic as the film. The colors and environments will pay homage to established cyberpunk themes while blending these themes with modern-day architecture.
To match the setting and art of the game, there will be utilization of interactive and adaptive audio used throughout the entire project. As dramatic or suspenseful events in the game unfold, the non-diegetic sound will keep the player on the edge of their seats by matching the tone of the environment with suspenseful musical scores. Events such as walking into a hologrammed room or chance encounter with an NPC will trigger the adaptive audio based on the player's state and should heighten awareness of the event about to unfold. The player will be exposed to realistic sounds as well as futuristic audio to capture the neo-noir essence we want to offer the player. Effects like water dripping from a drain pipe and voiceovers from NPCs and main characters will bring the story to life. Other diegetic sounds will include pings when the player is picking up items, eerie creaks when opening doors or cabinets, and multiple sound assets for firing weapons and other environmental audio. Weapons will have some futuristic interactive sounds indicating changes to type, ammunition, and capabilities. As the player traverses the environment, narration will be triggered to allow story progression and assist the player in completing missions. Dynamic audio will change with the player's state and the environment they're in, such as having an up-tempo musical score for fighting scenes or having a calm tempo for exploration moments. At its best, sound can portray an emotional feeling that can draw the player into the world. Accompanied by visuals that will portray a not-so-distant future, we will pair the ambiance of a suspenseful movie with action a player can really immerse themselves in.
In this third-person action-adventure mystery, the player is Detective Gumshoe, a member of the SSU. In this role, he will need to solve mysteries and make choices based on his experience as a detective. The main mission sequence is linear and requires the player to collect clues and solve a series of murders. The first meaningful choice our player is faced with is which faction, if any, he will align himself with. The three factions all offer their own benefits and drawbacks to the player. The Family is an amalgamation of several organized crime groups who found themselves in dire straits since they've been implanted. Alignment with this faction benefits the more combat-oriented player. An ally of this faction has access to weapons of higher lethality and benefits from the faction's mob mentality. The player choosing this faction will experience resistance from the neighborhood patrol and will have difficulty accessing members of 7th Street. The Neighborhood Patrol is a heavily armed descendant of the Neighborhood Watch, who've been hired to protect wealthy residents and their business interests. Alignment with this faction benefits the player looking to upgrade and exploit the capabilities of his cybernetic implants. Players choosing this path will receive upgrades and unlock abilities in the technology realm. The Neighborhood will also assist in making his holograph projection abilities more realistic and longer lasting. Members of the Neighborhood Patrol are in a constant battle with the Family for control of the streets. 7th Street is a coalition of residents who only want to protect themselves from anyone who threatens them. Alignment with this faction takes a more passive role in survival. This offers our player the ability to succeed with missions using a less combat-heavy path. This offers the benefit of obtaining non-lethal upgrades and weapons. The faction also opens pathways of travel that are unknown and unavailable to members of the other two factions. On completion of different types of missions, the player will be rewarded in 3 ways. They will receive experience points that will accumulate and lead to level progression. Experience points can then be spent on upgrades on the combat, tech, or espionage trees. Credits will be added to Gumshoe's wallet, allowing her to purchase upgrades from faction and neutral vendors. In faction-based missions, the player will be awarded reputation points that unlock upgrades in equipment and cybernetic capabilities. Positive reputation gains with one faction will result in a decrease in reputation with the others. The player will need to run, jump, crawl, and climb the terrain in order to traverse the faction towers and explore the facility to search for clues. Following leads will be aided by her PhD, an easy-to-use personal holographic display that will assist in searching for persons of interest, locating new clues, and collecting evidence, enabling the player to progress in the story. Gumshoe can set up traps for potential perpetrators with the use of holographic decoys, walls, and rooms. She will also use SSU scanner technology to scan memorized chips and suspects.
Gumshoe Chronicles will have a progression-based system. In addition to tracking information, the PhD will also track how the player completes their main missions, side missions, and reputation with the different factions. The player will have the choice of how to handle different situations with either lethal or non-lethal approaches. These actions include interrogating witnesses or deciding how to handle an angry and potentially dangerous mob. The player will have the ability to modify aspects of the game that most appeal to them. This happens by giving ways to modify their character weapon items and melee combat. Throughout the game, there are hidden items and missions unlocked through exploration. This is made more interactive with the ability to scan for false walls. These unlockables will trigger hidden achievements that the player will accumulate through their playthrough. A flash at the top of the screen with Achievement Unlocked will show the player that they have accomplished an achievement. Combat consists of both melee and ranged abilities. When entering combat, the player will automatically engage with their melee weapon. During range combat, the screen will zoom slightly in and move the player character to the left or right to increase visibility for firing the weapon. The user interface allows the controls for all of the abilities to be customized by the player, but they are automatically assigned by default.
The user interface draws inspiration from Deus Ex Human Revolution. The information covered by the interface will be broken up into 2 types: Primary information, such as a minimap for tracking enemies, health and armor levels, an ammunition counter, and a tracked objective. And secondary information like a mission log, a hotbar with mappable item ability slots, and a large map showing the layout of the area. The difference between the primary and secondary information is that the primary is on display at all times, whereas the secondary is brought up with a context-sensitive button prompt. Upgrades can enhance the visuals on the UI and change the player's perspective for different situations. For example, a visual implant upgrade can help the player track enemies more easily. Navigation implant upgrades can increase the level of detail on the minimap.
The target platforms are Xbox One, PS4, and PC. These devices support the graphics requirements and jaw-dropping visuals the game has to offer. A mobile app will also be available to view maps, find helpful advice on specific topics, read the 2032 version of the New York Times, and immerse further into the Gumshoe universe. The immersive experience that is Gumshoe Chronicles 2032 is a pulse-pounding investigative mystery that unravels right before the player's eyes. The scenes and background story add to the realism of the elements and NPCs that interact with the player. Music and sound effects will complement our efforts to plunge the player into a world that we feel will be intriguing and compelling for our target demographic. The visuals and gameplay will entice players' curiosity to discover everything this game has to offer. We hope that you enjoyed our presentation. Until then, detectives, keep your weapons charged and your eyes open.